Hi, Eric Gibaud, ericgibaud.com, and today we're going to speak about the difference between a mirrorless camera and a DSLR reflex camera. Let's start. Well, very often I receive questions, people asking what is better, reflex camera, mirrorless camera, what should I buy, all this. So I'm not going to tell you which one is better or worse. Why? Because this war is over. Really, they're really similar. The results are really similar, but the way to use them may be different. So I'm going to speak about the differences, technical differences, a few things that you need to know to decide whether you prefer to have a DSLR or a mirrorless camera. First of all, we all have mirrorless cameras in our pocket. Most of us, as telephones, smartphones, for example, they have a mirrorless system, and many compact as like this, many bridge cameras, but most of them are mirrorless cameras. Reflex cameras, they come from DSLR cameras, a single lens reflex. It means you have a single lens reflex, which is a mirror, and the light comes through the lens, while the picture through the lens reflects on the mirror, goes to a pentaprism, and you actually see in the viewfinder the image. That's reflex. It comes from this. Okay. So when you make the picture, the mirror lifts, then the shutter opens, the picture, the light, and your picture hits the sensor, and the picture is being made. In a mirrorless, you don't have any mirrorless, logically. So it means that what you see is the image goes through the lens, gets directly to the sensor. So what you see in the viewfinder is actually what the sensor is seeing. There is no reflected image, and actually what you see in the viewfinder is not optical. It's a viewfinder is actually a really micro screen, and you're looking at a really small screen like a small TV, and what you see is what the sensor has been capturing. And actually you can actually see the same thing on the back LCD of your camera or through the viewfinder. Many mirrorless don't even have any viewfinders. So that's basically the main difference. Quality wise will be very similar because the sensors are really similar, very often the same. For example, the Canon RP has a similar or really almost the same sensor as the 6D Mark II. One is mirrorless, the other one is reflex DSLR. So really don't worry about that part. We're going to speak about other parts, and I think that are more important. The good point about mirrorless is that as your image or the light hits the sensor directly, you actually can see in real time highlight warning or underexposed warning, because the sensor is actually seeing. You actually do some focus peaking, you know exactly where the focus is made. You have some zebra or for the highlight or whatever. That a lot of information you know before pressing the trigger. Why? Because the sensor is really seeing the picture before it's being made. When you use a reflex camera, what you see is actually what the mirror is getting. So until you press the trigger, you don't get information in real time because the sensor has not seen yet the picture you're going to make. So after, yes, you will have in the review, you can actually see where there was some highlights or shadows or whatever. But before triggering, you don't have this information. So for me, this is a really a good point, a good advantage of mirrorless. It really helps you do everything in real time before pressing the trigger, and this is a good point. Then you will get to the viewfinder. On the mirrorless, it's an electronic viewfinder, and on the reflex, it's an optical viewfinder. So the good thing and bad things of both. The optical viewfinder has the advantage of being clear. Daytime, what you see is exactly what's there, the light that is there. So you're happy, you see everything sharp, noise. You don't have any delay on previewing because what you see is actually what reflects on the mirror. But when it's nighttime, there is less light, you don't actually see anything. On a mirrorless, in daytime, you will probably see similar, maybe a bit worse, because it's a small LCD screen. You actually see sometimes, depends on the quality of the camera you're using, some small dots, or there is some delay. If you move like this, you have some delay and the thing is going like this. So that may bother you, but when you get to nighttime, you can actually amplify the signal that gets to the viewfinder, and you have like some night vision, so you actually see better, and you can actually compose in the dark. Even if you don't see anything with your eyes, you can actually compose because you have amplified the signal and you see a lot better in the viewfinder. So both have their advantage and disadvantage. It really depends on the kind of picture you're making. If you're doing sport photography every Sunday midday, a reflex camera is probably the best viewfinder you will find. But if you look at it at night time, you would probably prefer a mirrorless because you can actually amplify the signal and see better. So it all depends. By the way, hi to my Leica friends who are probably thinking, yeah, you don't speak about rangefinder cameras. No, it's something about mirrorless and reflex cameras. Rangefinder are really a side. People who watch my channel normally are more likely to buy a standard mirrorless or reflex camera than to spend a lot of money on a Leica camera. But I'll do some speaking. I do have a Leica myself, a Leica M4P, an analog camera, and it's true that if you look in the viewfinder, it's like looking through the window. It's perfect. So actually, it doesn't really bother me if it's electronic or optical viewfinder, because after looking through a Leica viewfinder, anything is worse. So you just say, well, yeah, this one's a lot worse, and this one is a bit worse, really. But we can't compare. It's another story. So honestly, between what is the best viewfinder, it depends on you. Some people will say one thing and they're right, and people say something completely contrary and they're right also. So it all depends on you. So before deciding, it's one thing you should check. Look through a viewfinder. What is true is cheap mirrorless cameras don't have really good viewfinders, and high-cost mirrorless have normally very good viewfinders, and the difference is not that much with an optical viewfinder. Size and weight. Well, all what I'm telling is is true in 2019. 3 years ago, that was not that way, and in 3 years' time, probably it won't be that way. So I don't know when you are watching this video, but update your information, because things are changing really fast. So at the beginning, many people were saying, I prefer to have mirrorless because they are smaller bodies and lighter, and if you have to carry it the whole day or put it in your pocket or in a small bag, it's better to have a mirrorless. But this is changing. Why? Because a small mirrorless still exists, obviously, and there are many small mirrorless cameras, but many of these people who do like wildlife photography or sport photography and use really long lenses, they were really complaining that camera bodies were too small, and it was not well compensated. So now there are some mirrorless cameras that are larger and bigger in top of the range, like the Alpha 9, for example, Sony, or in macro four third, the Olympus 1X is actually a lot larger than it used to be. Why? Because people want something that feels bigger in their hand, so the grip is better, it's more balanced, all this. So what I'm saying is true in some cameras, but not always. So check the model you are interested in, obviously. Battery life. Many people complain that battery life in mirrorless cameras is a lot shorter than reflex cameras, and they are right. But this is changing also. Sony issued a new battery, the Z series, and with one single battery you can actually do 1000 pictures. So this is a lot more than many reflex cameras. Why do they use more battery? Well, basically because in a mirrorless camera, the sensor, when you use the camera, needs to be always active to actually show you in the viewfinder on the LCD screen what's there. So it needs to be active. On a reflex camera, it's asleep. It's only when you press the trigger that it wakes up. So really, it consumes less power. So this is why battery on reflex cameras can give a lot more pictures than in mirrorless cameras. But that's not always true. Check the model you're interested in. But these general rules still exist in most mirrorless cameras. But mirrorless, normally, most of them, they let you plug a power bank. So even if you're out of batteries and you want to keep shooting, if you have a power bank, you can actually connect it on the USB port, and you actually keep shooting or charge the battery with this power bank. So what you lose on one hand, you actually get it on the other. So it all depends what you're doing, really. Many people say, yeah, mirrorless cameras have more electronics, so there's more chance to have a breakdown. And that's true, there is more electronics. But in reflex camera, there is also electronics, except if you speak about analog cameras and a fully mechanical camera, there is electronics. So with just one part that fails, your camera is out anyway. So it's really the same thing. But it's true that there is more electronic on the mirrorless, so maybe more chance to have a breakdown. But in the reflex camera, there is more mechanical parts, like the mechanical part that moves the mirror. So actually, that could fail also. So I think it all balance one the other. So really, you should not worry about this. Well, I hope you don't have any problem with your camera, but it can happen with any of them, whether it's a reflex camera or whether it's a mirrorless. Sadly, it can happen to both of them. People were saying that mirrorless camera, they are less solid, they're less protected for dust and humidity, all this. And it was really true at the beginning when they were doing like more entry or mid-level mirrorless cameras, and the quality was not as good at construction and protection, all this. But nowadays it's less and less true. I mean, you see top of the range mirrorless cameras and they are really dust protected, freeze protected, humidity protected, rain protected. So if you look at the Olympus 1X, for example, or the Alpha 9, all this, the quality is really top. Anyway, so you should compare what range we're speaking about, because if we look at top of the range, are really similar. So this thing I tell is not that true anymore. It really depends on the model you're looking at. Personal image. It's true that many people say, I don't want mirrorless because it's a small camera and people don't take me serious. I don't look professional. And for many people that was true, or is still true. I think general public is more and more used to look at mirrorless or see mirrorless cameras. So they're not surprised anymore that a professional use a smaller camera. And I don't think this is a valid point. I think if you show your pictures and you work, they're able to think about your work and not about the gear you're using. So it's more a matter of self-confidence and explaining your client why you use mirrorless. Sometimes simple things like, oh, the good thing about having these small cameras is that at your wedding I can get in small spaces I could not get with the larger cameras, or things like this, blah 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 blah. Anyway, but people will think that, oh, that's great, he has a mirrorless camera. That sounds stupid, but that's the way it is. So don't worry too much about this. Just work on the way you present the gear you use if you need to present it. If you don't need to present it, it doesn't really matter. Lenses. Well, many people says that mirrorless have less lenses available. And it's true. It was really true at the beginning. You would buy a mirrorless camera and there would be not many lenses available. So you would probably need to use a reflex lens and use an adapter. And the quality of the autofocus or some feature were not activated if we were using an adapter, and it was not that good. So many people started to complain about that. But this is changing. Why? Because all brands like Nikon, Canon, with their new mirrorless R line or Z line, they've started to get their own new lenses. And Sony has many lenses also, and Olympus and Panasonic, all this, Fujifilm. So this is less and less true. It's true that you can say, yeah, but there is 1,000 lenses available for my reflex camera, and there is only 300 available for my mirrorless camera. Yes, but you need 3 to 5 lenses. So the important is that the one you need exists, and that's it. Don't worry about the rest. You're not going to buy anyway 1,000 lenses, are you? So what's the matter? Noise. I don't speak about optical noise. I speak about sound. Reflex camera, when you actually trigger, the mirror makes some noise. It's like and the shutter, and there's nothing you can do about it. It makes some noise. You can maybe lift the mirror before, but even though it will make some noise. So it's important that you know that in mirrorless you can put the electronic shutter, then there is no shutter moving. It's like switching on or switching off the sensor, if I speak basically, no? And it means that if you need to make picture with absolutely no noise, and you stop this noise confirmation for the autofocus, then it will make no noise. So if you're doing like a picture in a church or a classical music concert or whatever, this is perfect. So if you really, or you're spying or you're paparazzi or whatever, that's a really good point to know that when sometime you need, you can make zero noise. Another point that is a bit of a problem with the optical viewfinder is that when the mirror is up, you actually have a blackout. You don't actually see anything through the viewfinder. If you're doing like a burst of pictures, if it's not too high speed, you will see black, see, don't see, I see, don't see, I see, and that may be a problem. The good thing about mirrorless is if you're an electronic shutter, there's absolutely no blackout. You see all the time what's going on, even if you're doing you are in burst mode. So really, that's a really good point. Depends on the kind of picture you're making. Frame per second. Well, on the reflex camera, there's a physical movement of the mirror. So there is a top speed, and it's very hard to go faster because then the camera will be like this, shaking because of the speed of the mirror. So really, faster speed like the Canon 1DX Mark II is 14 images per second. And this is about the top of a mechanical system, which is reflex. In a mirrorless, most of them do directly 20 images per second, and some with electronic shutter, they go even faster. For example, the Olympus, the OMD EM1 Mark II do 60 images per second. I know that many people say, yeah, but this is like making video, that's stupid. No, video doesn't give you raw files, and it doesn't give you the largest resolution, so really is really different. So if you really need high speed burst, mirrorless is probably the way to go. To make the autofocus, a reflex camera uses the mirror and also a different system, okay, but doesn't use the sensor for that. And most of the autofocus points are centered around the center of the image. And the best cameras normally cover 60% of the surface of the image, but all stack in the center. That means that if you want to make a picture and the autofocus needs to be in the right corner, left corner, top corner, whatever, and probably there's no autofocus point there, so you will have to reframe every time, so that complicates. On mirrorless, you actually have, it covers about 90% minimum of the surface of the image. Some go up to 95 or 98, I can't remember. It means that you could actually place an autofocus point at any place on your image. So if you're doing like some action photography, you want to have this right in the corner, even if the subject is coming fast, but you know exactly where it's going to be, whatever will follow him, you actually can do more creative things because you can actually have your autofocus made in any part of the image, and this really helps. And also mirrorless, it will give you face detection, eye detection. This is also really good. And also most of them, along with the touchable screen, they let you select on the screen directly where you want the autofocus point to be active. And also very often you have the option to trigger at the same time. So if you want to do like a macro photography, you have your camera on a tripod, you have the screen there, you say I want the picture to be made here. Okay, obviously macro is more usual to do manual focus, but that's an example. You're among the crowd and you put your camera above your head, you can look through the viewfinder. If the screen can be tilted, you just look there, you see I want here. You make the autofocus and the picture at the same time. So this is really a good point. Not having a mirror is a really good thing because actually there is more space in there in the camera. Or if they make it small, obviously not. But if they keep a similar size or a bit bigger than necessary, there is space to place an IBIS, in-body image stabilization. And normally in reflex camera this doesn't happen. There is no IBIS in reflex cameras. The stabilization is in the lens, and IBIS normally give you like up to 6 stops, 6.5, depends on the camera, stabilization. So this is great. Lens stabilization normally 3.5, maybe 4 stops. so you don't get stabilized as much. And also a very good point is that if you're on electronic shutter, you don't have anything that moves, no moving part in your camera. It means you're going to be able to lower your speed a lot. It's possible with some camera to have a 1 second exposure and the image is not moved because the sensor is actually moving to compensate with image stabilization. And if it was a reflex camera, that's not possible because that speed you need to leave the mirror anyway. I know some people will tell me, yeah, but you can put live view anyway. Yeah, but live view is not the same thing, because live view option don't give you all the options mirrorless are giving you. So some people say, I buy a reflex camera with live view, so I've got the best of both worlds. That's not the way it works. Live view, they are normally more limited than a fully real mirrorless camera. So back to this stabilization. The fact of not having moving part, if you deactivate mechanical shutter, obviously, let you really slow down the speed. But even with mechanical shutter, you can really go really slow. With the mirror of a reflex camera, that will not be that possible. A disadvantage of mirrorless cameras is that when you take off the lens, you can see the sensor directly, so you can get some dust or some humidity or whatever in there that gets to the sensor. I must congratulate Canon for that. On the R camera, not the RP, the R, there is a small like protection that goes out if you take off the lens, and a small protection that appears, so dust doesn't get there. This is probably the only one that does this. If you look at reflex camera, there's the mirror, so the dust gets to the mirror but not to the sensor. But actually, don't forget that if you get dust to the mirror, when you activate the mirror making picture, this dust may land on the sensor, obviously. So it's important, if you see there is some dust on the mirror, you must clean it the same way, you must blow it or whatever. So but it is some kind of extra protection. I do hope that in the future most mirrorless camera will have that kind of protection as Canon has made, okay? But this is something you must take into account. By the way, many people think that when you clean a sensor, you have the risk of scratching the sensor. You will never ever scratch a sensor. Why? Because there is a glass in front of the sensor. So what you may do is scratch the glass. Obviously, it's still costly to change it, okay? But what you're actually cleaning is not the sensor, but the small glass that is in front of the sensor. So what's the best? Mirrorless cameras or DSLR? What's better for you? Well, it depends. I would say both are the best or both are not. It depends what you need. What I wanted you to know is about the main difference, and that may help you to take a decision on what to buy, this one or that one. But really, I do think most of my viewers are mid-level. Some people are top level, but mid-level, entry-level, or mid-range. And obviously I speak to everyone, but I would give that kind of advice. If you really have a basic budget, I would probably go to reflex camera because the autofocus will be better, and because the entry level of reflex camera is cheaper than the entry level of good mirrorless cameras. Like if you look at a Canon 4000D or T100, it's a lot cheaper than a decent acceptable mirrorless. I speak mirrorless with, you can change the lenses. If we speak about bridge, there are some more options, okay? But if we look at camera, you can actually change lenses. Reflex camera, entry level will be cheaper. And if you're looking at entry level mirrorless and you're thinking about action photography, the autofocus on the basic reflex is probably better than the autofocus on the basic mirrorless. But this is today. Tomorrow is changing. We see more and more mirrorless with incredible autofocus. So it's hard to tell. The thing you must do is try. So I don't tell you to buy both and keep the best one, but actually you could. There are many shops that let you take both and you bring one back, or Amazon like this, you have 30 days. But I think the best thing is you go to a shop, see both, try, look, test, and see what you like most. But honestly, in the future, myself, I would recommend a mirrorless camera. Why? Because it gives many more options, like previewing the right exposure, focus peaking, many things that you won't have on a reflex cameras, and that will make your life easier. Rather just tools. I mean, not that one is better than the other, they're just different. At the end of the picture you have to make it yourself anyway, but try them, have a look at them, and see what's probably best for you. I hope you like this video. If you think it may help other people, please share it on social networks. If you have not done yet, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. There's a small button down here and also a small bell. If you click on it, you will get notified when I upload a new video. My website, ericgibaud.com. If you have any question, you can leave a comment below or send an email to info@ericgibaud.com. Below I also put links of my gear on Amazon and also links to other parts of my YouTube channel. Thank you very much. Bye.